Hi guys. So today's a fun lesson, or it would be a fun lesson if we were together, the human reproductive system. So we're going to look at the male and the female reproductive systems. We're going to start with the female reproduction system today. So just as review here, reproduction, the process by which organisms make more organisms like themselves. So even though it's needed to keep a species alive, it's not essential to keeping an individual alive. So it is not necessary for anybody to reproduce or to have children. For our species to survive, clearly it is, but as an individual, it's not important. Now, males, of course, we know produce sperm. Females produce eggs. The eggs, scientifically, you would use the word ova or ovum. So information about the parents are found in the genes of the egg and sperm cells, and this information gets passed down to their children. So this is what we did when we were looking at the different alleles, right? So the Punnett squares, that's the genetic information that's getting passed down to offspring. Okay, so we're going to first just look at the female reproductive system. I'm going to switch my marker. I don't like that green. Okay, so the female reproductive system is located inside of the body. So we've got a picture here, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the functions, you're going to copy these down here. So the functions of the female reproductive system are to, firstly, to make eggs, to receive the sperm, to provide a safe environment for the developing fetus, this would be after fertilization occurs, and to give birth and nourish the baby with breast milk. So those are the four functions, four main functions of the female reproductive system. So you can pause your video and make sure you copy those down there. Now we're going to take a look at the different structures in particular. So first one we have is the labia. The labia is the two pairs of skin flaps that surround the vaginal opening. So this one has the labia minora and majora. Basically, that's just an inner and outer part of it here. So if you look here, so it's these parts here. This is the labia here. So it's the skin flaps that surround the vaginal opening. Now, between the labia are openings to the urethra. So the urethra is the tube that carries urine from the bladder to the outside of the body and the vagina. So here, if you look at this is a picture of the female reproductive system. So you'll notice the urethra is right there, okay? So it's in front of the vagina here. This is the vagina there. And then the labia, again, is outside there. Okay, now the vagina. The vagina is a muscular pathway that is 8 to 12 centimeters long, so it's not that large. It's the route for menstrual blood to leave the body. This is just a diagram of it here. So this is the vagina, this part here. So it's a very short little tube kind of. So muscular pathway. So again, pause the video, copy these things down in your notes. It is also where the penis is inserted during intercourse, so that would ensure pregnancy, or the possibility of fertilization. And it is also the pathway for a baby to exit the mother's body. So as you can see again, this is the vagina here. So that fetus here is going to come out, and everything's going to have to stretch and expand, and it will come through the vagina. So through the vagina and out. Now, cervix. This is where the vagina connects to the uterus. So if we look at our diagram here, the cervix is this part here. So it's where the vagina connects with the uterus. The opening is very small. It's no wider than a straw, and it has very thick, strong walls. And the reason why it's got these thick, strong walls, it's a very strong muscle, is that when it's time for a baby to be born, the cervix and the uterus here are what pushes the baby out. But we'll talk about that more later. Okay, the uterus. So uterus, very thick muscular walls. So it's about 7.5 centimeters long and 2.5 centimeters wide. So not very large, but again, it will expand to allow a developing fetus to grow. It's also known as the womb. So when you hear people talk about a womb, this is the uterus, and this is where the developing baby grows. it is able to expand and contract during childbirth. So during childbirth, the uterus is going to, like it's a muscle, so it's going to contract and expand over and over again to help push the baby out. And the lining of the uterus every month for females is excreted during menstruation. So once they've hit puberty, that's what happens. That's the lining that is bled out. So this is just a clear diagram here. So we've got our vagina. So right at the bottom here, we've got our labia, and then we've got the vagina through this section here, and then this here is going to be our cervix. So the cervix is the opening into the uterus. So the uterus, this is where our little baby would grow if there was one. And then we're going to talk about our ovaries and the fallopian tubes. Now the fallopian tubes, let's go back here. These are the fallopian tubes here, okay? So those are the fallopian tubes. So you've got two of them. They're each attached to a side of the uterus. They're about 10 centimeters long, and they're only about as wide as a piece of spaghetti. So they're located at the upper corners of the uterus, and they connect the uterus to the ovaries. So if you look here, they don't technically connect, but they're these little like fingers, kind of little flanges here. And so what happens, the ovaries are here. So the ovaries are where the eggs are produced. So say we have an egg that's going to be released. It sort of gets in there, and then these wavy little fingers here sort of grab it, and then the egg travels through the fallopian tube. Now, at the end of each fallopian tube, right, is the fringed area that looks like a funnel. So this area wraps around the ovary, so it doesn't completely attach to it, like I said. So when an egg pops out of the ovary, it gets picked up by the fallopian tube. So once the egg is in the fallopian tube, it gets pushed down to the uterus. So once a month during ovulation, an ovary sends a tiny egg into one of the fallopian tubes. So this is the little egg here. So it gets tiny little egg goes into the fallopian tubes. Let's go back. And then it will just travel through. And if it's not fertilized, it'll end up into the uterine lining. And then eventually, if it's not fertilized, everything gets taken out through the vagina. Okay, so ovaries produce eggs. Main function there, 3 centimeters long. They're little walnut shaped things. They're not very large. Thousands of eggs are in the ovaries at birth, but they're inactive until puberty. So females are born with all the eggs they're ever going to have, and then once a female reaches puberty, they will just start expelling the eggs or releasing the eggs. The ovaries are also responsible for producing hormones. So that's where our estrogen comes from, for example. Now, the menstrual cycle. So the monthly period in girls, the monthly period in girls, I should have said females there, sorry, once they have almost finished puberty. If the egg has not been fertilized by a sperm while it was in the fallopian tube, the egg dries up and then it needs to leave the body. So blood and tissue from the inner lining of the uterus combine to form the menstrual flow, which usually lasts 3 to 5 days on average. So this is a good diagram of the menstrual cycle. So here, this is where we start here in the ovulation phase. So thickening of the endometrium. So this would be the lining here is called the endometrium. So the egg gets released. So the egg came from one of the ovaries, doesn't matter which one. Typically for most people, they alternate each month. So and some those of you who ovulate, you may actually feel it. So sometimes people can actually feel themselves ovulate, like they'll get a little bit of a cramp in one side, and when that happens, that likely is the egg being released from one ovary. So only one egg typically every month, except for fraternal twins, and then there's 2 eggs, but Anyway, so the egg gets released, travels through the fallopian tube to the uterus. Now, at this point, it does not implant because it has not been fertilized. So, what ends up happening is the endometrium sheds. So, all of the lining here sheds out. And then we go back to the follicle phase here, and this is your developing egg, and we start the process all over again. Now, there's something called premenstrual syndrome. You've probably heard of it, PMS. This is discomfort experienced in the days before a female's period. So, this would include both physical and emotional symptoms, usually disappears once the period has started. Okay, so that's all that I'm going to talk about the female reproductive system here. But I would like you to take a look in your textbook on page 80 to do questions 6 to 8, and page 90 questions 1 to 3, and then 9 and 10. We will have a Zoom meeting to correct these probably on Tuesday, but I will post on that on the website on Schoology a little later. Okay, thanks guys.